Namaste. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the origin of Vedic teachings, especially with regard to the Rig Veda and in the Western world. Today in the West, it's commonly believed that the secret nature of the Vedic texts, including the Rig Veda and its translation, has come to us from Sri Aurobindo and also through Vasishta Ganapati Muni. While these two modern rishis were indeed responsible, directly and indirectly, for the spread of the modern knowledge of the Rig Veda, according to traditional concerns and translations, it was Maharishi Dayananda Saraswati, much earlier, who actually started looking towards the original Vedic translations and texts that came up with the idea that the earlier medieval commentators on the Rig Veda, including the British and the German scholars, were incorrect. He looked back to the original texts and started to state the origin of various words themselves and what the deeper meaning actually was. Sri Aurobindo himself stated that Maharishi Dayananda was the first discoverer of the modern clues in regards to the Vedas and also in regards to science and technology in the Vedas, which Sri Aurobindo continued and said that Dayananda had in fact understated rather than overstated the technology in the ancient Vedic Shastras. There are some common examples that we hear about things such as the Astra mantras, the weapon chants seen in the Rig Veda. This is something that Vasishta Ganapati Muni himself worked on very deeply and gained a lot of his own inspiration indirectly from his guru, the silent guru, Sri Ramana Maharishi. Now these Astra mantras were known in the Hindu tradition for several thousands, in fact hundreds of thousands and even millions of years in the Vedic texts. Maharishi Dayananda stated that these Astra mantras were not only known to most Brahmins in India at the time, but in fact had been misinterpreted. His view was that these Astra mantras were called such not because when you chant them they release a weapon itself of Shakti or power, but that they actually contain deeper wisdoms themselves on how to construct these ancient weapons, such as the Agniastra or the Pashupatastra, etc., that we'd read of in texts like the Mahabharata, where they're deployed by the warriors. Now, indeed, there existed in various yugas both physical, sub-physical, and also astral technologies. So sometimes we find that these arguments with different scholars regarding the Vedas are in contradiction, but in fact they're not. They are simply stating different points of view. Another thing that is perhaps the most important thing to realize in regard to the Vedas is that the rishis that their names are written over the various suktas or the hymns in the Vedas themselves are not actually the originators of these mantras. To say that is very much like saying Susruta in later times was the real father of surgery, when in fact he was a student of the Dhanvantari school of Ayurveda, which it goes back a long, long way, back to the Devas, the gods themselves, including the Ashwini Kumars, who were the twin physician gods in the Rig Veda. Susruta and also Bhava Mishra in later times as well both state the origin of surgery with the Ashwin gods and credit them as even being able to restore heads to decapitated bodies, as well as other feats that not even today we can do with our surgical techniques. So Susruta, meaning he who hears, Sruta, well, Su, is himself from the lineage that heard this very well, as it states. So the name of Susruta itself contradicts the idea that he came up with surgery or even invented it along with his guru. And it's the same with the Vedic rishis also. The reason that the names of the rishis are written over the mantras is simply because they were the rishis that were able to master these various suktas and their hymns and explain their meaning on a deeper level. Very much like Susruta brought out for the world Susruta Samhita, which was very, very good for lay people and other people in the world, as Charaka Rishi did and others did in later times as well. And another example is Patanjali Maharishi, for example, who is the author of the Yoga Sutras. He was not the founder of yoga, but he was simply someone who understood the science and wanted to bring it out for the world. So that is why quite often Patanjali is associated with Yoga Darshan, or the system of yoga itself. But it doesn't mean he originated. Hiranyagarbha in the Vedas, the divine son, was the originator of it. And we have other rishis down, such as Vishwamitra, Yajnavalkya, and others who also came later, as well as Sri Krishna over 5,000 years ago in regards to yoga. So the other question people have is, okay, so if the rishis, the names of the rishis are written over the mantras simply because they understood them and revealed them to people in more modern times. And why is it that sometimes the names of the rishis appear in the hymns themselves, such as Vishwamitra, Jamadagni, etc.? Well, the reason is that in the Vedic texts, we cannot just take a name as a proper noun itself. Sometimes it can appear as a common noun. Otherwise, the Rig Veda would appear as a Purana, a kind of ancient history book, much like the Bible. But it does not. The name Vishwamitra, for example, means the one who is the friend of all. From Vishwa, meaning all, and Mitra, meaning friend. But Vishwa also means the universe, or Jagat, the world. And as such, Vishwamitra can also mean, coming from the Vedic term, Vishwam Sarva Jagat Mitram, which means the one who sees the world as his friend. So one who is friendly to the world is a generic term. Also the seer Ushana as well is seen later as Shukracharya, the guru of the demons. His name means blessing everyone's welfare. So the one who blesses everyone's welfare can be called Ushana. And there are several other terms for the rishis as well. And the later texts, as the Upanishads and the Brahmanas, for example, elaborate on this quite a lot. We can see some of these names, for example, in Gotama. Gotama Rishi, for example, comes from Go, which means cows and also light, and Tama, meaning darkness, or Tamas, spiritual darkness. So one who removes the darkness or dispels the darkness is called Gotama. It doesn't mean a name directly. Other times the seers can mean other parts of the body, or also the pranas, the breaths in man as well. Vishwamitra, for example, is a synonym for karna, or the ear, in the Upanishads. At other times, Vishwamitra is also the right eye. And this is interesting because the right eye relates to the Surya Nadi, or the Pingala Nadi, which relates to the right masculine and solar side of the body. And Vishwamitra relates to the sun, Surya, because he brought out and made famous to everybody the Gayatri mantra which he mastered. So sometimes the seers are also named after the subject matter in the hymns themselves, because they have actually mastered that particular hymn and know the deeper secrets within it. They were named after it, so that it was, it's like calling somebody yogi or acharya, for example, in the yoga traditions, or Vaidyapati, for example, in the Ayurvedic system. It doesn't mean that that is their name, because in Vedic times there were several terms and titles that were used to describe different people, and again sometimes in regards to the subject matter of the Vedas themselves. So we must take these things into account. The Saptarishi, as many people know in the Upanishads, do correspond to the ears, the eyes, the nostrils, and the tongue. At other times, uh, different things like Vishwakarma, for example, who is often seen as the founder of the science of Vastu or Sthapatya Veda, which is the science of architecture and feng shui, is seen as speech. So Vishwakarma can also be a synonym for speech as well. And again, a lot of these terms, even for kings, can be taken in the wrong connotation, to be taken as historical figures when in fact they're not. A good example of an historical figure is Divudasa. Now, Divudasa means one who is devoted to the divine, or a devotee of the celestial, or devotee of light. And light itself, or divinity, relates to all sorts of other things such as wisdom, the quality of sattvas, etc. So one who is a divudasa is one who follows dharma, is sattvic in their mind, has a very, very good intellect and memory power, knows the Vedic texts, and also has a lot of bhakti shakti, a lot of devotional power as well. So also a Sudasa is one who is a good devotee, from Su meaning good or very great, Dasa meaning devotee. So one who is a good devotee, who is devoted to the Shastras and Dharma and also to the divine itself, can also be a Sudasa. And we can, in another way, we can actually take these terms to actually mean or denote synonyms for the bhakta or the devotee themselves in regards to earlier bhakti movements. Other terms that we see have been incorrectly taken as proper nouns in the Vedas as well. And the other thing is sometimes generic terms do not denote various people. Pani, for example, in the Rig Veda is often seen as a Semitic people of the Middle East. But again, that would have to mean that the Rig Veda was an historical text, which it is not. It's a spiritual text. A Pani can mean one of two things. It can mean a person that has very good conduct or actions, and also a generic term for a trader or a merchant, a person of the Vaishya caste or merchant caste of later times in India. So a person that generally trades in things, hoards their wealth, can also be a Pani as well. It has nothing to do with the ancient people of the Middle East. And a lot of these people derived their names from these Vedic terms themselves. Another term that we find in the Rig Veda in relation to Ayurveda itself is Kakshivan. Kakshivan is often equated with the later seer Dhanvantari due to his association with his father. However, the name itself means one who under the events of the world everything takes place under. So everything takes place under the world of Kakshivan himself, which also is a name for the Supreme or Brahman, and also one who is also a king as well. So a very influential person in the world that is able to shape society. A Rishi is known by this name as well. Again, it doesn't specifically relate to any one single person throughout history itself, as a lot of people think it does. This is incorrect, and again has been perhaps one of the most mistranslated terms in the Vedas themselves. And again, I have to reiterate that the Rig Veda itself is not, and the same with the other Vedas, it's not a historical text. It is a spiritual text, and we have to take it accordingly. We cannot simply take it as a mere historical text as well. Manu also is often seen as the first man and appears in the Rig Veda. But a Manu also is a person that is a wise or learned man as well. And someone who is a Surya as well in connection to Manu is also one who is a Sarva Vidya Acharya, or one who knows all of the sciences, who is a teacher of all of the Vedic sciences themselves. can be called as a Surya as well, a Surya type person. So these are some examples of the Rig Veda itself, and also the history of how this came about in the West uh, from Maharishi Dayananda, who had a great insight into the Vedic texts themselves, had read perhaps, I think it is stated in some texts, around 3,000 Vedic texts himself throughout Hinduism, and had memorized several of them. The Susruta Samhita, for example, he is said to have memorized in just 2 days and was able to then quote the original Sanskrit verses from the Susruta Samhita in regards to Ayurvedic surgery, the doshas, various imbalances, and incorporate them into his speeches. So this is what a true rishi is, one who can actually remember these things as well. Today we see a lot of people in the West who have not even, or even in India actually, that don't actually go through with the science of rasayana or rejuvenation, which is very, very important and is something that the rishis did. In the ancient times, we didn't wear glasses, for example, when our eyesights failed. We didn't start losing our hair. The vision of the rishi is one who is very, very insightful. In fact, blindness in Vedic terms is equated with tamas or darkness, spiritual darkness. Because if one's eyes are failing, generally their insight is also failing as well. It relates directly to the level of the mind. Formulas such as Triphala Grita are great Rasayana formulas that have gone back several millions of years in India. Not just thousands, not just hundreds of thousands, several millions of years in India, according to the traditional theories of the yugas. So these aspects are very important to start pondering when we're looking at Vedic study. And I've touched on the yugas, and there's something that I just want to make a quick note about as well. The yugas, or the periods of the various eras, from Satya Yuga down to Kali Yuga that we're currently in, a lot of people cannot get their head around them because they feel that these yuga periods are extreme, they are too long. However, if you think about what the Hindus have given us and the great wisdom that is embodied in the ancient Vedic texts such as the Rig Veda, there are various vimanas or flying machines, there are astras, there are weapons and technologies, there are surgical techniques that are beyond the comprehension today. And a lot of what we have today, such as our surgery, our mathematics, our numerals, even most of our astronomy, has come down to us from the Hindus. And they have also been very accurate in various texts in relation to distances from the Earth to other planets, circumference of the Earth, the age of the Earth, etc. So why should we doubt their theories of the yugas, that humans have lived for this long on this Earth? My view is that there were, in earlier yugas such as Satya Yuga, humanity had a more causal type body that slowly manifested physically as the yugas declined. It became more astral and then sub-astral towards more physical. And as the various castes also were created from the Brahman, which is the most spiritual and causal, so also these also declined throughout the world as well, and started to create various communities that we see as uncivilized communities. In the Puranas, we see various names of different kings, and it means that they had to have lived hundreds of thousands of years. But this is also not necessarily true either. In the Vedas, we read that one lives up to 100 years. However, we know that yogis can live much longer periods, very, very long periods. So that was for the average people to aspire to live that long. Yet the names of the kings or the rajas in the Puranas sometimes denoted an entire dynasty spanning several hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. It denotes not just one personality, but several figures along the way. For example, later rishis such as Vasishtha, for example, are not the same Vasishtha who revealed various mantras in the Rig Veda, or re-revealed them and became a master of those mantras himself from older mantras. but his own students and also his own lineage, his family as well. It means those down the line, which were several millions of years ago. So again, we have to take these things into proper context as well, and there's no need to start rejecting anything in the West simply because we don't want to agree with the Yuga theory. There are a lot of swamis and gurus in India, such as Sri Yukteswar Maharaj, who was a guru of Paramahamsa Yogananda. And he came up with a Yuga theory that was much less than the traditional theory. But we also have to remember he wrote a book called The Holy Science that had to, at the time, he was asked to correlate Christianity and Yoga Dharma itself. So it was very difficult at his time when they were trying to introduce yoga into the West, and when Yogananda had to go to America and introduce yoga to a very Christian audience. It was difficult for them to then start talking about hundreds of thousands and millions of years ago, and this is how long we existed to these audiences. So it was more of a bridging type phenomena that occurred back then, and that is why Sri Yukteswar had decided to do this as well, and also write his Holy Science, which correlates various aspects of the Christian Bible with the yogic science. But again, these things are not valid today. And the vision of Maharishi Dayananda was that we don't need to worry about these things. We can prove a lot of things that are there in the Vedic text. If we look at the original texts that give us insight into the translation of the Vedas themselves, then we're able to understand properly how exactly to interpret the hymns, and also in regards to today's technology as well. And this also reveals within itself technologies and truths that even today's scientists don't know, and some of them truths that they do know. And it ponders the question, if we did really evolve from apes, then why did these ancient people, even if we stick with 10,000 years ago, have this wisdom? So itself, it questions how old really is humanity. Scientists every day are now looking at how old humanity is as well. And there are several books written by members of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness that also detail these as well in a very good format, easy to understand for lay readers. So the opening up to the Vedic study is something very in depth. And it requires many years of study, and also many hours to actually ponder and meditate upon the hymns themselves, so that we can understand what the various terms mean, and again, not in an historical context as is commonly done. So hopefully this gives people a little more insight into the Rig Veda traditionally and how it's viewed, and also how the system has come in the West as well through Sri Aurobindo, and also through the followers of Ramana Maharishi and his disciple Vasishtha Ganapati Muni, that have brought out the Vedic text in a new light, but not always the same light as other rishis such as Maharishi Dayananda. And also the explanation of the rishis is often misunderstood, and the purpose of this and also my other books is to help people to understand the traditional view of these. Om Namah Shivaya.